Hello, everyone, and welcome. That was an awesome panel that we just had. I hope you sat through that. So many years of knowledge in that room. Great stuff there. Thank you all to all the panelists. Okay, the show goes on, and we have another good one for you, LLMjacking Exposed, how attackers hijack AI models. And leading the presentation today is Crystal Morin, who has more than 10 years experience in threat analysis and research. She began her career as a cryptologic language analyst and intelligence analyst in the U.S. Air Force, and as a contractor for Booz Allen Hamilton, where she helped develop and evolve their famed threat intelligence community and threat hunting capabilities. So amazing background. In 2022, she joined Sysdig as a threat research engineer on the research team, where she has since worked to discover and analyze cyber threat actors taking advantage of the cloud. She will speak to that today. And a little later on, a little tease, she'll be joined by her colleague, Emanuela Zaccone, a product manager at Sysdig, who is going to be leading an attack demo you don't want to miss. We're going to have some time for Q&A at the end, so there's a tab there for you to enter your questions in. We'll get those answered. Without further ado, Crystal, take it away.
Thank you, Dan. All right. Let's get started. Okay, here we go. So, LLMs, all of the bad things that you can and think may happen with LLMs. Hallucinations, made up information when an LLM thinks that it doesn't know the answer to your question. It just kind of makes up an answer, so you think that it knows the answer to the question. Stolen data, when someone has access, either malicious access or legitimate access to an LLM, and they ask questions of an enterprise-trained data set and receive company-specific information based on the questions that they are asking so that they can pull sensitive data out of that LLM. If you're training your LLM based on proprietary information, company specifics, how you're supposed to behave in your role or things like that, you ask it questions so that you can pull that information out of the LLM. These last two, a little sensitive. Data poisoning and prompt injection, very similar, but different bad things that can happen with an LLM. Data poisoning is when you are manipulating the training data of an LLM. This is when you have access to the training data, you mess with the access, the inference, and the reference material. So the code that the LLM is working off of, or maybe even Google Docs or something like that the LLM might be pulling information out of, and you change that to manipulate the information that is going into the AI model. Prompt injection, which is what Emanuela is going to show you later. You're not doing anything wrong per se. You are intentionally crafting the input, how you're asking the LLM questions, to circumvent and manipulate how the LLM is behaving while it's generating its response. But none of that is LLMjacking. So what is LLMjacking? This is a term that Sysdig's Threat Research Team coined in May of last year. It is just resource hijacking, like cryptojacking, jacking, resource hijacking. In all of the instances that we've seen, LLMjacking is from, starts with stolen credentials. We haven't seen any attackers gain access to an LLM otherwise, but that's not to say that it wouldn't happen any other way. TBD. But any enterprise access has all been through stolen credentials. So that's how they're doing it so far. And right now, it's all just cloud-hosted LLMs. So they're gaining access to enterprise LLMs, cloud-hosted in companies using their LLMs. So how are they doing this? Taking stolen credentials that they're finding on the internet, buying them from other bad guys on the dark web, getting them themselves some way, but it doesn't really matter how they're getting them. They're finding credentials and they're using them to log into an enterprise environment. Once they get into the environment, what we first saw in May of last year was they were using scripts to see what LLMs were enabled in the environment. Is this person at this company or this company in general, are they using generative AI? Which models are they using? Let's use a script and go see which models they are using, if any. And that's how it started. If they had one enabled, awesome, they would go and start using it. If not, they would just move on. We reported a second blog in September of last year, and they started picking up the pace. We saw more attackers, LLMjacking, so different people, not just one person. Several people were taking advantage of LLMs at that point. And there were lots of attacks. It wasn't just a couple. There's a graph in our second blog, and there was lots more attacks happening. Instead of looking for LLMs that were already being used by the enterprise, they started enabling their own models. So they would go into the enterprise. So this company's not using any LLMs. So they would enable models on their own. So they're getting a little more confident at that point, and that was only after a couple months. Sorry, I told you it was really sensitive. So they're learning and understanding over just a couple months how to use these LLMs within an enterprise environment. What are they using them for? To bypass sanctions was a really interesting thing that we found. Amazon and Microsoft in, I believe it was 2022, restricted access to some of their products for, they restricted access in Russia. So folks located in Russia couldn't access AI models that were hosted by Amazon or Microsoft. So we did see some of this coming out of that region and other regions that do have restricted access to some of these products. We did see some non-malicious activity like schoolwork. We saw papers, school things being generated, totally not malicious. Malicious access to using somebody else's LLM, but they were using it to get their homework done. We also saw script writing for like just creative role play. They didn't want to write out a story themselves, and they didn't want to pay to use an LLM, so they used somebody else's LLM, and they had these really cool, fancy scripts written. On the more malicious side, one of the really cool ones that was identified, they asked an LLM to write a script to abuse another AI tool. So they asked the LLM to write a script to further abuse AWS Bedrock. So that one was really interesting. Just tool development and enhancement, and then things that we haven't seen that we expect to see, like that first slide, let you soon see, but I mean, prompt injection and things like that. We think we'll see more of that in the future as well. All right. So the consequences and what you can do to stop LLMjacking. It's expensive. LLMs are still new. ChatGPT only came out a couple of years ago. I think it really made